Okay, mic check, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
There we go. Yes.
Much better.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. Let's try this again because I see some members present that weren't able to respond. I apologize. Hang on. Let me share. Okay. Okay, Mike Corcoran. Okay. Seth Grainer,
Here.
Daniel Baum,
Present.
Dicky Fernandez,
Present.
Sue Lester, and Chair Elodie Katz.
Present.
Committee Member Chora, is that you? Hi, thank you for being here. That is roll call, Madam Chair.
All right, I'd like to open up to public comments. Are there any members of the public on the line? That would like to address anything that isn't specifically on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item B1. Excellent timing, introduction, welcome, Rosemarie Chora. Thank you for being here.
The video of the boardroom is not being shown to us online. It was earlier, but now it's not.
Or the microphone's not working.
Oh, no, he just couldn't see the
Oh.
video, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that hopefully they will be able to see. Go ahead, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
I just want to make sure. Okay, all right. So we'll move on to item B2, provide direction to the Board of Directors regarding the 2021 wastewater rate study. Mr. Carroll?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome Citizens Committee members. And I know I think this is our second time we met in person since COVID-19. And for those who've been here in the past, we usually set up an L-shaped type meeting, but we're still trying to practice COVID procedure. That's why we're in a classroom setting, kind of separating you apart to still practice those COVID policies. But thank you for being here tonight. So on the item we're talking about now is the wastewater rate study. The wastewater rate studies are periodically performed to determine if the district is generating enough revenues to meet expenditures. The last wastewater rate study was done nearly 10 years ago, and the last wastewater rate adjustment was in 2017. In the last 5 years, expenditures have been exceeding revenues. In fact, the district has used reserve funds to balance fiscal year 2021-22 and fiscal year 2022-23 wastewater budgets because expenditures are exceeding revenues. On July 1st, 2021, the district solicited proposals from qualified professional consultants to prepare a wastewater rate study that describes the justifications and calculations for annual wastewater charges. When proposals were due on August 5th, the district received 3 proposals that ranged in cost from $29,500 to $67,569. The consulting firm Robert D. Nyhouse, or RDN, submitted the proposal that is considered best value to the district and was awarded a contract for $29,500. This evening, RDN project manager Ichiko Kido and her team will be presenting their study findings describing the justifications and calculations of the proposed rate adjustments for the next 5 years. Now, last Tuesday, the board received RDN's presentation and directed staff to bring back more information to a special board meeting scheduled for next Monday, November 16th. Specifically, the board wanted to know how the proposed rates correlate with inflation and the total percentage of wastewater rate increases from other Orange County agencies. And I believe we can probably share some of that information with you tonight. At the conclusion of RDN's presentation, staff is seeking feedback, comments, questions, and ultimately the recommendations to the board of directors from the Citizens Advisory Committee. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ichiko and her team to begin the presentation. So Ichiko, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. If I may share my screen, I would appreciate it. Let's see. Let me know when you guys can see it.
I can see it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me rearrange things a little bit here. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Ichiko Kido. I'm the project manager for this study. I am here with Anthony Elowski. I'd like to thank you first for giving us the opportunity to present our findings to you all today. The district staff and the team RDN worked very closely together for the last couple of months. Our company RDN is an economic consulting firm focusing on assisting municipal agencies in the area, including LA, San Bernardino, and Orange counties. We find that many of these agencies all face the same similar issue, mainly trying to find a solution to fund maintenance and repair or replacement of the aging system infrastructure. Now, oops, sorry about that. Special thanks to Scott, Mark, and Caitlin. They're extremely helpful and responsive, always try to provide us high quality data right away whenever asked. And it really, truly showed their commitment to make this important study successful. So thank you. We couldn't have done this without you. Okay. First, we wanted to share some of the key assumptions we made. The account growth is obviously one of the most important assumptions that we carefully make. The figure you see here shows somewhat conservative growth projection, though it is based on the historical trend we saw in the district's records. Now, this shows that the district will be adding about 160 to 200 new accounts per year. Scott did share the housing elements report you may or may not be familiar with, but this that report is from the City of Costa Mesa Planning Commission, and that indicated the need of 11,760 additional homes in the city between 2021 and 2029. Now that translates into 1176 homes, 1,176 homes annually. Now we've run some analysis based on this assumption and share that with you in the later slide. Another projection we made was the growth in the accessory dwelling units in the district service area. Accessory dwelling units, we normally call it ADUs. Homeowners are taking advantage of AB 68, Assembly Bill 68, which loosened some of the restrictions around such housing units. Now, one of the attempts we made in this study was to establish an ADU charge based on their growth projection. Here are the escalation factors. We apply these factors to each of the line items of the district's budget and escalate for the next 5 years, because costs in the budget today would not stay the same, right? Now, overall inflation, CPI, fuels, utility, energy, equipment, these expense items are escalated using the BLS for LA, Long Beach, Anaheim region. We normally use a 20-year average. Personal expense breaks down to the cost of living component and additional merit component of about 2.6% and 2.4% respectively, totaling about 5% combined. Now, These numbers were derived from the district's historical data. So this escalation factor was created specific to the customer sanitation district. Construction cost. This one has been, very interesting. We have seen some crazy, increases in this past year. But to capture this crazy trend, we used a 5-year average instead of 20 years of the LA Building Construction Cost Index from engineering news record. It's called the ENR. The highest escalation factor we derived is the insurance cost. The district has experienced some very steep increases in the recent years. So this data, this escalation factor is also from the district specific, derived from the actual historical data. Now, these are the current rates. Residential rates are set per dwelling unit, and non-residential customers rates are established based on the square footage of the building for their businesses. The unit rate shown here are charged for every 1,000 square feet. So if your business has, let's say, 3,000 square feet and you run a restaurant, then your unit charge is $44.81. Now, you have 3,000 square feet, so you multiply that number by 3. So the total bill for that business is $134.43. That's how we calculate the current rates. This slide shows a very simple comparison of revenue and expense. Scott mentioned that, in the recent years, they've been experiencing, the expense is exceeding their revenue, which we found it to be true as well, especially for the coming 5 years. Now, the blue bar is the revenue, and this bar includes all the revenues, including like non-operating revenues, such as investment earnings, inspection fees, and other, revenues from like a miscellaneous charges. The expense side, the red bar includes all the capital improvement costs and operating and maintenance expenses. Okay. Now, these are some of the major expense items identified by the district staff and included in the study. It is important for all the customers to know, what their rates are actually paying for, right? So we've requested the list of these items from the district, Scott and Mark, and they provided them to us. The biggest item here is 2 additional employees that will be added next year to the district, and a combo cleaning truck that is scheduled for purchase in the next fiscal year as well. This slide includes more like a bigger items. Let's see, forced main replacement, rehabilitations, manhole rehabilitation, pump station rehabilitation. All of these projects are over $1 million. All critical projects, though, in order to keep providing the safe services to its customers. The most important equation for a public agency's finance is simple but highly scrutinized, which is cost must be equal to the revenue, right? The tilted scale to the left needed to be balanced by adding the final component onto the revenue side, which is the revenue collected from customers' bills. So when we identify the last final component, revenue from the rates, that is the revenue requirements, the amount that we need to collect from the customers. And the table below that, show that calculation how we calculated the revenue requirements for each year that are included in the study. Now, please note that Proposition 218, that regulation limits the number of years that we can implement proposed without going through another Proposition 218 process. This is why most agencies do a rate study like this one once every 5 years, as again Scott mentioned. Now you can see the revenue requirements go up from 6.3 million to $9.3 million over the 5-year period. These are the proposed overall revenue adjustments. With these adjustments, the district will be able to operate the system and provide safe services to its customers and reach the target reserve balance of about $10 million by the end of the by the end of the study period. Now that shows in the blue bars. Look at the green bars. If you don't do anything at all, no adjustments, you will quickly eat up the rest of the reserves, and the district will see a negative balance, a cash balance by the 5th year of the study. This is not sustainable. You cannot operate a system with a negative cash balance. Now, the district has 3 reserve funds, which 2 are somewhat fluid, right? The district takes out money from those 2 asset funds to pay for the CIP capital improvement projects as needed. So only reserve fund that is there for emergency purposes is the operating reserve. This is supposed to cover the operating costs up to 3 months in unforeseeable emergencies, such as natural disasters, political crisis, and disease outbreaks. In fact, many agencies experienced this in the past couple of years. A lot of customers were not able to pay for their utility bills, and utilities are not able to charge late fees, or they could not shut off the service because the state did not allow it, right? So as a result, there were so many delinquent bills that these agencies could not collect. So that created a huge revenue shortfall for these agencies, and they struggled tremendously. So the district reserves have to be there, healthy, balanced, needs to be maintained to prepare for these emergency situations. Our primary goal is to mitigate the rate impacts on all customers. But at the same time, we have to maintain the equity of all customers. Now, the best way to do this is to follow the same methodology that was used in the last study, wherever we can, as much as possible. Now, we made a few changes this time around, and after conducting an extensive review of the old study, we felt these changes are necessary. Now, the first change we made, or actually this part we didn't make, the master plan, the recent master plan suggested this change needs to be made. The total flow of the district was reduced from 11.1 million gallons per day to 8.6 million gallons per day. So we did adjust that in analysis. In the old study, the second change is in the old study, they used 55 gallons per person per day for both single family, I'm sorry, take it back, not for both, for single family residential customers. And they used 40 gallons per person per day for multi-family residential customers. Now, we argue that per person flow, indoor flow that we are suggesting here should be the same regardless of the type of residence you reside, right? Because the flow is pretty much determined by factors such as how many times you go to the bathroom or how many times you take a shower in a week. And those are determined based on more of like a personal needs or personal preference rather than the type of units you live in. So we changed it to 55 gallons per person per day for all customer classes, residential customers. One of the resources we believe the most reliable use the same flow for all residential customers. So again, we decided that this change needs to be made in analysis. The third change we made is how we calculated the flow for each customer class. In the old study, they determined the residential customers' usage first, and then they subtracted the residential customers' flow from the total flow and called it non-residential customers' flow. What we did is we determined the flow, we estimated the appropriate flow for each customer class, and we scaled them down to match 8.6 million gallons per day to calculate the proportionate cost of service for each customer class. So those are the three changes that we made, but the rest of the approach, we kept it the same. Now, we believe that per person usage, indoor usage should be the same regardless of the residence type. We believe that household size can be adjusted. So this next couple of slides, it shows the exercise we did to identify the household size for each customer class, residential customer class. Now, we used American Community Survey 2019 data, and we estimated household size for single-family residential customers first. Unfortunately, they don't give you the number. So we selected 2 zip codes that cover most of the service area in the district and gathered the data for the number of single-family residential housing units. And we also found the single-family residential population. So we took the population and divided it by number of housing to estimate household size. So that's what you see here, weighted average of 2.95. That's the household size that we used in analysis for the single-family residential customers. We did exactly the same calculation. For multifamily residential customers and trailer. And as you can see, we saw somewhat scaled down household size for those 2 customer classes, 2.52 for multifamily residential customers, and for the trailer, 2.39. So the table here in pink that shows kind of scaling of the charges that we developed. Let's say this is not true, this is not the actual rate, but let's say single-family residential customers rate is $100. We are saying that multifamily residential customers charge should be $85, trailer should be $81, and accessory dwelling unit rate should be $42. So we were able to create this nice scaling for this study to develop the charges. Cost of service analysis, probably the most important analysis that we do in the study. This develops equitable cost allocation to each customer class. If you remember, we identified about $6.3 million of revenue requirements. So what this figure says is under the current cost of a service, under the current rates, you are actually collecting 34.3% of that cost from single-family residential customers, let me get that laser really quick here so I can point it. Right, 34.3% right here. But under the proposed cost of service, we should collect about 32.2% of the total revenue requirements from single family residential customers. So you can see small shifts, in each customer class cost allocation. And this is totally normal, natural. That's why we do this study every 5 years to capture the shifts in the cost of service in each customer class. So here are the proposed, again, preliminary rates. Now, yes, these are the preliminary rates. And if we make any changes on the financial planning side, these rates will change. We created this figure so that you can see, the change in the charges. You can see most of the customers will experience small changes, while multifamily residential customers and trailers have a little bigger impacts than other customer classes. Oops, I'm not able to change the slide for some reason. There. And here you can actually see in the numbers. These are the proposed rates for the next 5 years compared to the current rates. One thing, again, to note is that these are, now this is important, these are not to exceed rates, meaning the district can implement lower rates than these, but they cannot implement higher rates than these, right, in any given year. So that is one of the reasons why we used the straight line growth projection rather than the rapid growth. That may or may not happen, right? So the district must mitigate its financial risk, by taking a conservative approach. But again, it is important to note that, these proposed rates can be adjusted if the rapid growth actually happens and the district to generate more revenue than they anticipated. We wanted to share, so we showed the rates we developed for commercial customers and the industrial customers, but those were the unit, one billing unit price. So we calculated bill for their median bill. For example, commercial one, the average strength customers, their median billing units is 13.5, right? So their charge, the actual charge that appears on their tax bill will be $561.71. Under the current bill, they're currently receiving, $556. So this figure tells you the actual the amount of charge that they will see in tax bill based on the square footage of their businesses, but for median customers. We talked about earlier that there is a document the city published that indicates 11,760 additional units are needed to meet their housing demand. And I want to show you if in fact all of those units are built, how the rates would look like for single family residential customers. So the gray line is the proposed rates. Starting point is $95.18, and it goes up to $138.85. If we use the assumption that all the rapid growth actually happens, then your starting bill will be $93.15. and you will end up at $126.03 by the 5th year of the study period. Now, we did additional analysis per Scott's request. You can see it in the blue line. Now, this one, so the district's rates hasn't changed, hasn't been adjusted since 2017, and it kept at $92.38. And then let's say that charge should have been inflated every year, at least at the CPI rate of 3.4 to 3.5%, and what the bill would look like now. Starting point is a different $92.38 in 2017. And, currently it is the same rate, but let's say it has been inflated since 2017. That will end up at $130.03 by fiscal year 2027. So we thought this was somewhat interesting analysis. And to be just completely transparent with you all, we wanted to share this figure. Here's the comparison. I know there are a lot of agencies included in this figure. I think you probably have to take a look at, I don't know if this slide was actually included in your package. We updated this, but currently Costa Mesa, their rate is $7.70 per month. And we are suggesting that should be adjusted to $7.76. And by the 5th year, the final year of the study period, that fee is going to be in a yellow bar, which is $10.50. So, even after the 5 years, your rate is way below the average charge other agencies, all other agencies that is shown in the red line. And this was the last slide. If you have any questions at all, please do ask.
Thank you, Ichiko. Does anyone on the committee have any questions? Rosemary.
I wasn't sure, when was the last?
Thank you.
Thank you, excuse me. First timer mistake. I'm not sure if I caught when was the last time a rate study was conducted?
I can answer that question. The last rate study was conducted in 2012.
So then it doesn't occur every 5 years. We're doing it today and we're doing it for 5 years, but it doesn't regularly occur every 5 years.
So what Ichiko recommended is the standard is do it every 5 years. But what happened was, so we have a wastewater and a solid waste rate. The board has taken a position not to raise both solid waste and wastewater rates simultaneously because it's the feeling was just too much on the residents. So we had a rate increase on the solid waste side back in 2019. That was the first one we had in 15 years. We wanted to stabilize the wastewater rates for 3 years. Then COVID hit last year. So now we had to prolong another year. And so that's why we're doing a study now because it's after COVID. And so if the board approves those rates, they'll go into effect next year. So it'll actually be 5 years since we've had a wastewater rate adjustment. And that's one of the reasons because of COVID. So that's why we got behind the schedule a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you could speak in the microphone, please, Sue.
Hi, I have a few questions, several actually, but I was hoping other people would ask some of them. So since nobody's going, let me take this off. You could probably understand me better. Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, the rates are being almost overestimated over the 5-year period. So you have wiggle room to decrease them, right? Because isn't it like Prop 218 or something? You have to have a Prop 218 hearing if you increase them.
They're not being overestimated. They're being, based on our projected expenditures for the next 5 years, the proposed rates will generate enough revenues for those expenditures where, as Ichiko mentioned, we cannot make a profit. We're supposed to break even. Now, if that rate is too much of a burden for the CAC or the board and they want to lower that, they can do that. That's what we're seeking from directions today and from the board. If by year 5, $138, if that's too much to swallow, that's too much, you don't want to go that high, then tell us where do you want to cut, or tell us to go back and cut a little bit and lower that rate.
Okay. This was, I mean, maybe just for me, but it was a lot of information. It was kind of overwhelming and a little bit confusing in some places, at least for me, for the amount of stuff. The presentation cleared up some of it, but I almost don't feel like I even know enough to make a recommendation on what I think is the right thing to do. Do we have any historical data on what any of the other cities have done in terms of like the percentages of their increases, like
Yes.
like cities?
Anthony or Ichiko, can you share that screen, please? That was a question the board asked last Tuesday, and we prepared a slide for that.
Cool.
So you can see.
Sure, let's see if I can pull it out. If I don't encounter any technical difficulties here. Maybe Tony, you might be readily available that table somewhere. Let's see. I think I can do this. Hold on a second. Since I'm sharing my screen, might be easier. Let's see. This is the latest that I've seen, hopefully. If you guys have made any additional edits, I might not have captured it, but this will give you the general view. These are.
I think there's a revised one, isn't there, Anthony? Is there a revised one?
Okay, this one is not right.
Yes.
Yeah, we have one that has a couple more agencies in it.
Okay, let me find it. Tony, are you able to share your screen and show that figure?
We're going to try to let Anthony, we're going to try to share the screen for Anthony. So.
Yeah, he's just sent it to me, so I will be able to share that with you. This one.
Yes, that's correct. That's it.
Yes. Sorry, it took a while, but yeah.
Cool.
Such a timely question. I appreciate that very much because Anthony worked hard on this. So Costa Mesa, the cumulative rate increase is about 4% for the last 5 years. But some of these agencies, like you can see.
Can you expand that screen? It's a little hard to see on it. Can you make it bigger by any chance? A little hard to see.
How about
There you
this?
go. There you go. That's better. Yes, thank you.
Better? Tony, do you want to explain the figure since you worked on that? Unmute yourself and talk to it.
Sure. We lost it. Over the last 5 years, the Costa Mesa Sanitary District has only had about 4% of rate increases. And he did mention the last rate increase was during that 2017. So I did some research on other local agencies, and then most of them have performed rate studies within that period. And the cumulative rate increase from fiscal year 2017 to 2022 is presented here. The ones with the star besides their name have actually even more rate increases planned into the future based on their last rate study. So those numbers will increase. And the San Juan Capistrano is expecting rate increases of nearly 230%, according to the local area formation committee down in Orange County there. They're looking into combining with Santa Margarita Water District, but they discovered that there was quite a bit of infrastructure that needed to go in to even complete that joining of the two
Actually-
agencies.
Yeah, if I may interrupt you, Anthony, actually, that the LAFCO did approve that annexation. So the water, wastewater utilities for the city of San Juan Capistrano is now under the Santa Margarita Water District purview. So in that LAFCO report, they identified some major revenue shortfalls for their wastewater facilities. And like, as Anthony mentioned, some significant increases are in the future for San Juan Capistrano.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful because looking, at least for me, I didn't really have any frame of reference.
I think what's really important about this graphic is if you look, a lot of residents like to compare us to Newport Beach, and look what's the highest one is Newport Beach, right? And even if you prove the 5-year rate, the highest rate is still lower than Newport Beach. And talking to my colleague in Newport Beach, that 145% rate increase is still not enough over there. They kicked the can down the road for so many years, and they finally got the council to approve a rate increase, but it's still not enough. They still need more money.
I think this, I know at least for me, is really helpful to see like where we are way down there as opposed to everyone else. Because when I was looking at the numbers on here, you can't help but jump to the 5-year. And then you look at that number compared to what the current number is. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. But when you look at it this way, it brings perspective.
Most people are going to tie and look in the percentage, and what we're recommending is a 50% increase, and that percentage is high. But if you look at the number value, it's not as high as you would think, as you saw in that graph. Even the high end, our rates still be one of the lowest in the county.
Yeah, that's okay. That makes sense. I would suggest that if the board moves forward to do this, make sure you have that graphic somewhere on the website so people can see it, because that really kind of shuts down a lot of complaints.
Yeah, we put that in the staff report that's going out tomorrow. So that graph's going to be in
beautiful.
their staff report tomorrow. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you.
If I could interrupt also, if Ichiko, could you go back to that last slide, which is actually very similar to this slide in terms of, that wasn't just percentages, but it's absolute value of what people are paying. It's also very telling.
Let me try to get there.
And do other cities, as you broke it down by multi and single family and ADU, do other cities also break it down? As you show us this chart here, this is an average across all the different definitions of housing, right?
Right.
And so again, this is also, just as was said a moment ago, this is also very telling to show that, the high end of $70 versus $7. I mean, it's 1/10 the amount approximately. Is there any understanding or knowledge of why they're so much higher? Are there just bigger challenges on their end, or is it newer agencies that need more infrastructure set up? Do you understand why theirs is so different from ours?
You'd have to read their study thoroughly to get a better understanding why they're justifying their rates. You'll notice a lot of the higher rates are in South Orange County, and they don't use the Orange County Sanitation Treatment Facility, so maybe the treatment there is more costly. But I don't know for a fact.
Yeah,
I think that would. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference. Costa Mesa, the main service that they provide is the collection. And some of these agencies that have higher charges, they do the treatment itself as well. So sometimes it's difficult to compare, just by looking at the rates, because the principle of financial planning is the same. The cost, has to be equal, the revenue, right? So each agency has their own justification. But Costa Mesa, without any doubt, you guys are one of the lowest rate that I ever helped, assisted.
Right, and understanding why some are, 10x or 5x, I think would be very beneficial for Costa Mesa, as well as for this whole study to say what's really driving these costs. If it's driven by, as you said, using outside agencies that extend pricing significantly, again, 10x or even 5x. I mean, a case study of one or two of these other areas to better understand what the breakdown of their costs are, I think would be very beneficial. Whether it's convincing ourselves or it's convincing the general public, I think would go a long way. Similar to the comment about the percentage increases, the absolute value amounts will help, I think, justify and help people better understand what's going on.
Absolutely. Definitely include that in the report.
All right, thank you.
Beth, I think I can answer some of your questions. One thing to keep in mind is when it comes to infrastructure, agencies and municipalities are always playing catch up. We're always behind. Also, in the past 10 years, there's been a legislative effort to really decrease spills, infiltration, inflow. A lot of the agencies that you're seeing in the graph that's on the screen right now are smaller agencies with smaller pipes. And those are very susceptible to a lot of infiltration, and that requires a lot of upkeep, maintenance, and rehabilitation projects, which have really impacted their budgets. And to create those capital improvement projects, they really depend on rate adjustments to be able to fund those projects and achieve, in some cases, EPA decrees. I'll use the example of the city of San Francisco. It's been pretty massive over there, but it also happens here in Southern California. So it's something to keep in mind. I also want to take everybody back to the beginning of the presentation. Ichiko made a very good point, and you can see Costa Mesa Sanitary District's most recent historical expenditures. They had to use some of the reserves. So there's already history that the budgets that they've been using are just not enough to keep up with their needs. So I think that I just wanted to say that I think this presentation was really well put together because it really shows the need for the rate adjustment. And I think you're making a very good case. And I'm also, as a resident, I'm really glad to see that, we're not looking at a rate adjustment like the city of Newport Beach or some of the more drastic ones. I myself work for the Orange County Sanitation District. We go through the same process. It's not a fun decision, but it's definitely a need that I think is quite well justified with this presentation. Thank you.
And thank you.
I agree. I think this was well put together, and I think that just a couple of bullets on a slide like this, I think would go a long way to make it even stronger. But I think what you have here is very valuable.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh. Seth, could you repeat that, please? Your audio kind of cut out.
I'm sorry. I think that what they put together is a very valuable presentation. I think that if they add a few more items, a little description on this slide, as well as the percentage slide, to help us better understand kind of the baseline, the difference between why, Costa Mesa is at 770, moving up to 1050. But as you look at what's going on in other cities, we're very low compared to them. And here's the justification as to why we're able to be. Again, maybe it's because the pipes are smaller at other areas. They rely on outside services that are more expensive. And if those things are what drives their cost to be so high, people in Costa Mesa should realize that, we're very fortunate to have a situation where we don't need a higher rate to address those issues. And as these numbers go up, they're still very much smaller, maybe because, or primarily because, we don't have those other challenges in front of us.
There's also an additional intangible that's not been discussed here, but that's part of the cost these days in public works, and that's the result of the pandemic and the supply chain problems. We are seeing it in our public works projects, in our capital improvement projects, a very significant increase in cost because contractors are also susceptible to supply chain issues. They're having to pay more for materials that they're using for the construction of our projects. Labor is coming at a higher cost as well. And it was mentioned in the presentation, insurance is going up as well. So you put all that together, the budget for capital projects is just going up. And contractors are really busy right now. And so they're bidding projects fairly high because they can stand the risk of not getting the job because they're just busy. So they're just bidding high, and they're with their strategy of, I'm going to bid it high. If I get it, great. I'll make a lot of money. And if I don't get it, I'm not losing much because I'm busy, right? And that's the kind of environment that we are exposed to right now.
Rosemary had her hand up, and then Judy.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions. One of them maybe sounds silly, so will the other. But do you consider, or is there a consideration of evaporation in any way in this?
Consideration of what you?
Evaporation. Like, my big for instance is that across the alley from us, there's a house which very regularly sends a lot of water down the alley. And a lot of it dries as it goes. They use a lot of that water because they have pet pigs and they're stinky. And the water is actually stinky to the people across the alley from them. But by the time it gets going past us, it's kind of dried up.
I don't have an answer for that. I'm sorry.
Typically, water, the overuse of water would be a concern of the local water district. I think that's also a Costa Mesa water district, rather than the sanitary district. The amount of water that is sprayed outside that gets into the sanitary system is part of the study overall, but if this is evaporating, it probably isn't making it to the sewer system and isn't really a cost that's considered.
Okay. And the other question that I had was, you seem to label the single family as a group, and it's the whole thing. But there are many single family types. Some people have 5 or 6 in their single family. Most of the people on our block in our area, I don't know, have turned out to be widows or widowers. Sorry, I guess we got in there kind of late. And looking at this and thinking, whoa, that's high. You know, how is that going to affect being able to pay for it? And what am I paying for? Everybody else's. Oh, good. Okay. Now that I know I'm doing something fine.
No, honestly, I don't think it's designed that way purposely, but single people end up subsidizing larger families in single family homes because of the way they have to calculate it based on population and use and number of homes and all that. I'm in the same boat. But they don't actually use census information to apply number of people into houses and all that. It's total population. So when you look at that graph, with those numbers, that's what you think. You're like, okay, that's all well and good, 2.75, but there's only one person in my house. How do I fit into it? And so I mean, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. No, that is a really good, valid point. It is possible to include variable component to the rates. This time around, though, the district hasn't had rate adjustments for a while. That our primary goal was to, develop rates that, will recover the revenues as well as, equitability among different customer classes. But that's something we can definitely take a look at the next time around. I think it's very good points that you made there.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a question from Rosemary and then Daniel, and then I think we need to regroup because we're getting into 7 o'clock. Rosemary.
I have a couple of questions. The first comment I have, I think previously, and maybe even this slide, it seems to be providing some information, but the way some of these things are labeled, it's difficult to understand. And when we're looking at the cost comparison between Costa Mesa and other agencies or cities, it doesn't even, that graph doesn't even clearly state what these rates are for. So I had assumed it was for collection only, but then you mentioned that some of these agencies are providing treatment. And so are we looking at Newport's costs for collection and treatment versus Costa Mesa's collection rates only? And then that's not comparing apples to apples. Now we're artificially implying that we're extremely low, which I think a lot of people prefer that their rates are low, but it could be a little misleading.
Yep.
And then that brings me to some concerns, and I'm sure that the general manager has taken this into effect, but there's just so many new regulations coming out, SB 1383 being one of them, to ensure that there are sufficient rates available to adequately respond and implement upcoming regulations, because we could be paying very low rates, which is great, and then start getting hit with fines and fees and being penalized. So to ensure that we're meeting that compliance, the biggest concern I have with what I saw was I also saw that there were significant increases in rates for, I believe it was multifamily properties and also for trailers, which predominantly would imply to me possibly low income or seniors. And I'm kind of curious, like what's different today in 2021 than what was observed in 2012? Like, why are we seeing the significant increases there?
Yeah, let me answer the last question first. One of the slides I mentioned that in 2012 study, they estimated per person's usage at 40 gallons per day for multifamily residential customers and trailer customers. And we found that to be difficult to justify. Some of the resources that we rely on, they propose the same flow level for all, per person usage. And sewer flow, that's mainly used for indoor, right? So we have to be able to make the argument that people who live in a multifamily residential customers or trailer, they use significantly, less water per person level. That means, they might not go to the bathroom as many times, or they don't take a shower. And we just find that to be, a difficult point to argue.
So it's only the indoor use, I understand that.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that the age of the properties and the fixture flow rates are
Exactly.
similar or identical across those customer classes, single family, multifamily, trailer. So on average, they're about the same age. They're like the single family homes aren't built in the 40s and the trailers they rolled in 2020. So I'm assuming that also has been considered.
Yes, the newer homes might have more like efficient appliances that do not use as much water too. And some of those older units might be using older appliances that might use or take more inflow, basically. But yeah, you made a really good point about the comparison study that we conducted. We always kind of feel the same way when we create that figure. We are not really comparing apples to apples because every agency's need is different. But that figure will probably put you in a good perspective. And then also we would like to take the recommendations from the other gentleman who spoke earlier, probably adding a couple of bullet points, explaining why there are such big ranges in sewer rates. If I were, the district's customers, I would be worried, is it sufficient? Does it really cover all the costs that needed? What's the reason? Why are we paying such a, small amount of a service fee compared to some other agencies? So I think those bullet points are a great idea. And then we will make that changes in that slide.
Thank you. And I do agree, especially if we haven't really looked at this since 2012, that it is imperative that this move forward.
Yeah, if I could just add on the rate comparison, like I show you, most of those agencies, those rates do not include a treatment rate because most of those agencies belong to Orange County Sanitation District, which we are a member. Newport Beach is a member, and we pay a separate fee on that. Most of the South County cities, for example, Laguna Beach I believe had a decree again on EPA, and also a non-government organization, the River Watch, has sued them. So they're under court orders to do massive capital improvement projects. That's why their cost is very high, because they've been violating the Clean Water Act so many times. And then most of the cities down in Orange County, South Orange County, like Molten Lake Gale Water District, South Coast Water District, they do use a different treatment facility, but we'd have to look into their study to determine if that rate does include treatment. They might be charged separately, like we are, or at OC at Orange County Water District, and we can confirm that when we present this to the board next. Thank you.
Those were some excellent questions and wonderful points. I was wondering if Daniel still had his hand up, if he'd like to ask his questions.
Yes, I'm just curious about the projected, I believe, new accounts that was stated early in the presentation. I think there was something like 1,100. Is that correct?
So the current rates are based on the projections shown here. I think you can still see this figure. Now, in this projection, we are adding about 166 to 172 new accounts annually. And we did this projection based on the historical trend. So we looked at all the records from the past, and we projected for the next 5 years. The number you mentioned, 1176, that is the number the City of Costa Mesa Planning Commission developed. And those are not the projection, but rather they are stating, you will need to increase 1176 additional homes in order to meet the housing demand in this area.
Right. So those are different than the actual account growth projections on the slide.
That is correct.
Right. And then these projected are just based off of previous years.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So it's just a trend that you guys are following.
That is correct.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to check in with staff at 7:10 already, and we usually adjourn by 7:30.
Yeah, if we can get if there's no more, I mean, we can move to 7:30, And if you still want to talk about this, that's fine. There's just one more item on the agenda that I would like, if the board, if the committee is okay to discuss, and that's the proposed ordinance. I would like to, if that's okay with this, the committee, at least have that discussion this evening. But if you want to continue with the rate adjustment,
Are you looking for just various comments from individuals of us, or are you looking for a vote from the committee as to how to proceed?
yeah, ideally, it would be nice to have a recommendation from the committee as a whole, but if you don't feel comfortable doing it, that's fine too. I've taken some good notes I could take back to the board. It would be nice to get a recommendation. Do you support the recommendation staff's making, RDN staff's making, or do you recommend a lower rate? You know, what is it that you want to recommend to the board?
Okay, I'll put it back to the committee members. Does anyone want to ask any additional questions? No more questions. Do you feel like you have enough information to make, would anyone like to make a motion and we can discuss it?
I make a motion that the Citizen Advisory Committee recommends to the board to move forward with the proposed rate increases through the next 5 years, providing the rate comparison of all the other cities is part of it. And hopefully we do some great community outreach, town halls, something to soften the blow a little bit. I know that's kind of a crazy, but that's.
I believe with Prop 218, we have to have the town halls. Is
Yes,
that
we do.
correct?
We definitely have. So we definitely plan on having 2 more meetings with the board at minimum, maybe more. And then they'll set a public hearing first thing in 2022, which will give out notices to the public. So every property owner will get a notice for the proposed rate, and they have a right to protest those rates. And then the board will set a hearing, and if we do not receive a majority protest, then the rates will go into effect in July of next year.
And the 2 meetings with the board, are those special meetings or are those part of their?
We have one special meeting on Monday, and then the board could continue this for their November 22nd board meeting, or they could continue it for their December 10th study session or their December 20th board meeting. There's some options, some additional meetings ahead.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a second?
I feel comfortable.
Okay. All right. And I would just like to clarify on the comparison that it will have the bullet points that were pointed out by Seth and clarified by Dickie and then brought up by Rosemary. If there's any way to clarify which ones maybe are covered by OC Sanitation District,
Yes.
that would be helpful. Okay. All
Will
right.
do.
I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor of recommending to the board that they, what did you?
I agree with the recommendation.
As presented by Ichiko and her team, but with the bullet points explaining the various differences between the agencies. Say aye if you agree.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Aye.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I think it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for hanging in. Excellent questions,
you, Ichiko.
everyone. Ichiko, thank you. That was a great presentation.
No, thank you for great questions and comments. We will make sure to incorporate all of that with Scott's help.
I think so.
I'm sure if we could move on, if we maybe could delay item number 4, if we have time, we can come back to number 4, but if we can go to number 5.
Do you want us to approve the minutes quickly or?
Sure,
Okay.
the minutes be fine. yes,
Okay,
fine.
so item B3, approve the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting minutes of September 8th. I want to thank Sue for chairing that meeting since I was absent for that one. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes and or have any questions? If no questions, would anyone like to make a motion to approve them?
Make that motion.
Bill, excellent. Thank you. Judy seconds it. Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes as
Aye.
Aye.
all abstained since I wasn't at the meeting. Okay, it passes. Thank you very much. All right, so jumping to item B5.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on January 1st, 2022, local jurisdictions in California will be required to implement one of the most progressive environmental laws in the country that will try to reduce emissions of short-lived climate pollutants. Your staff report describes in more detail the requirements of SB 1383. And even though the main burden for complying with the new law falls on cities and counties, the law does apply to special districts. The first step for the Costa Mesa Sanitary District is adopting a mandatory organic waste disposal reduction ordinance, and a draft ordinance is before you. On October 22nd, 2021, the district solid waste ad hoc committee met to review and comment on the proposed ordinance. Suggestions made during the committee meeting are identified in the attached second draft version of the ordinance. Last Tuesday, the board of directors reviewed the proposed draft, and public member Mr. Jim Mosier submitted comments and proposed edits to the ordinance, and copy of his edits are before you tonight, and I believe those edits were also emailed to the CAC members this afternoon. So the draft ordinance is currently being reviewed by CRNR, and District Council is reviewing it as well. Staff anticipates a final draft will be presented to the board for their adoption consideration on November 22nd. Staff is seeking your feedback, comments, and recommendations to the board of directors. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
I've been in touch with the solid waste consultant for the city of Costa Mesa regarding communities that just don't have space to accommodate the additional receptacles or containers for either solid waste, green waste, or even recyclables. He had told me that the city was meeting, I believe, in October to discuss accepting at least variance requests, recognizing that there are some of the small communities of maybe single family homes, but they're in such a small location that they don't have that room. Has the Costa Mesa Sanitary District had that discussion with that potential?
We have, there are, so right now under the law, every resident is supposed to have an organic recycling cart. Okay. And there are no exceptions. We've talked to Cal Recycle about this and think, can we make exceptions if there's limited space? And they're saying, no, we have to provide it for them. So it's something we need to work with the city and the residents that to find room for that cart. Maybe they have to give up a cart to make room for the organic cart. So then they'll encourage them more to get in the habit of discarding more of their food waste, more of their green waste. But at this point, unfortunately, we have no exemptions. So we have to give everyone an organic cart.
Thank you.
Did the city of Costa Mesa address the multifamily units that you guys don't service for trash with the same topic that Dickie brought up in terms of space? Like, I live in a fourplex. I live on a street that is all fourplexes, and each fourplex has one dumpster. And it's in the alley.
Yes, they are. That I can't speak for the city, but I know they're aware of the constraints that they're dealing with on the multifamily units. The city did adopt an SB 1383 ordinance, so it is official. Their ordinance is on the books now. So now they have to work with all the multifamily units in making sure that they have a bin for collecting food scraps and green waste, and that is going to be a challenge because according to the city code, they have to have a bin enclosure, right? And some of these places might not have enough room for a bin enclosure. What are they going to do? We haven't had a discussion with them because it's not our responsibilities. The city wants to take it on. So we're here that we will help them if they need it, but it is going to be a daunting task for them, no doubt.
I have a question about enforcement. Obviously there's code enforcement and the district has code enforcement, but the city has code enforcement. And I imagine CRNR is going to pay attention to what's going on. The city has more manpower, but the district has more experience. So how is that actually going to work?
I haven't worked out the deals on code enforcement because we have 2 years to start enforcing the law. What Cal Recycle wants all the jurisdictions to do in the first 2 years is education, outreach, outreach, outreach. They want to educate the public. Want to educate the public that if you don't change your habits, that you can get fined. So that's what we'll be focusing on these next 2 years. During those 2 years, we're going to be collaborating with the city of Newport Beach and Costa Mesa to determine who will be ideal for the lead agency of issuing citations. We do have authority in our district to write administrative citations, but whenever one receives a citation, they have a due process right, which means they have to go through in front of a public hearing or a public hearing officer. Right now, that public hearing officer is me. And so we have
Wow.
to, so we have to take that into consideration. What are we going to do if we're going to be the enforcer? So there's a lot of moving parts we have to talk about. The good news is that we have a couple of years to hammer this through. So I don't have a straight answer who's going to be enforced at this point, but we are going to begin discussions with the city on that real soon.
The only other thing I'd like to say, and then I won't ask any more questions or make any other comments, is as it relates to enforcement. The way it was written up was kind of confusing. I liked some of the suggestions that Mr. Mosier made. I also think that $250 for a first-time offense is excessive. I know it says up to $250.
I think I have a question. I think I'll look at it again, but we wrote the monetary fine. The fine for violating this law would be consistent with the current fine for putting a trash cart in a public view, which is $75. So if there was a first-time offense for violating SB 13.3, the fine would be $75. The second offense would be $150. The third offense would be $300. So that's consistent with the trash cart in public views.
Okay, that's better. Thank you.
I have a question. Have these, because I don't think we're actually discussing SB 1383, we're looking at your ordinances and the changes that you're hoping to make tonight. How were these ordinance changes developed? Were they done internally completely with the district staff, or did you utilize a consultant or work with industry work groups? How have you ensured that this is SB 1383 compliant?
We worked with the same consultant that's working with the city of Costa Mesa, Mike Valle, and we worked with him for several years on our solid waste contracts. He basically took the state's model ordinance, which all the jurisdictions are doing. Now, our ordinance is not as extensive as the cities because there's certain requirements not on our purview, but he did take that model and fine tune it to our needs.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
On the ordinance, that will, well, somebody's going to come and say to someone, you have to pay $250 for your first violation.
It's great. If it says $250, we'll have to look at it again. The first violation for violating this law will be $75. So, and so maybe I'll have to look at the ordinance. Maybe it might be a little confusing because there's $75 for the first violation for violating SB 1383 or storing your trash cart in public view. If you're violating any other part of the ordinance, then it's $250. So
Scott,
we'll have to clean that up.
yeah, Scott, remember, there's some mistakes in that in one of the earlier ordinances. It's very confusing. We'll fix all of that.
Yes, we'll clean that up. That's District Council Alan Burns.
So what are the next steps as far as legal review and what are the next steps with the ordinance?
Yes, so District Council Alan Burns is reviewing it right now. CNR is reviewing it. We will have it in time for the board's consideration on November 22nd. If we can, we can still push it back to December, but we do need to get it implemented before January 1st.
And I just want to clarify, this fine that's being discussed, is that through the audits where we're going to basically go into people's trash carts and check to see?
Yes, that would be correct. That is correct. So one of the outreaches is lifting lids and seeing if there's any violations. Now, Mr. Mosier had made some very good comments. As we probably don't have time to do it today, but in item number 4 on the cart-to-cart outreach results, we did to go out and lifted 180 carts. Of those 180 carts, we only found 7 that had food waste in them. Now, it's possible the food waste could have been buried in the green waste. We just didn't see it. And that's possible. And Mr. Moshe put that. That's a very good point. Another point he made is that maybe some residents are composting and not putting. Another good point. So those are some things we need to consider when we're starting to do the enforcement. So these are all good and that's really good ideas. But yes, if we lifted, basically what would happen if we lifted a cart, we see contamination, we give them a warning, and they will probably give them a couple warnings. You know, they'll get several warnings before they get the citation.
Excuse me, but will they, when the warning comes out, will they be specific as to what they're warning you about?
Yes, yes. In fact, in the outreach program we did, and we did last month, we're gonna do it again next month. What we do is they get a little tag on their carts, and here's one of them. So they get this tag on their cart. It says, "Awesome, you did a great job. You sort of separated your food scraps and your green waste, right?" And if they did a poor job, then they get this one. This is oops, meaning they forgot to put out the green carts. And then the next one, if we see contamination, then they get this uh-oh card on this. You mixed you mixed it. So and it can give you an idea. Here's what you need to put in your organic carts and your mixed waste carts. So those are kind of the type of community outreach we're reaching out to the public and warning the public or letting the heads up what is required. This is a huge behavioral change. We understand that. That's why I think the state understands that. That's why they're giving us 2 years to get that outreach out there. Another issue that the board is going to be considering in the future, and we'll bring to this committee here in the future, is do we go to a 3-cart system? We just got the results of the survey, and so we're looking forward to sharing that with you. We surveyed over 1,100 residents, and looking forward to sharing that with you. But that could be reality, going to a 3-cart system.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Anyone online? No.
No questions, thank you. I read
Oh,
it over and looked good. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I can't see it from here. Okay, thank you. And then this one.
But if I get a recommendation from the CCD, recommend you can make a recommendation to approve what Mr. Mosher's comments on there, or direct staff to consider Mr. Mosher's comments and present to the board of directors.
Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. To approve it with Mr.
Oh, sorry,
Murphy.
to go ahead and approve, Mr. Mo. I understand it sounds like there might be a little housekeeping on the fines and fees, but other than that, as long as it goes through the legal review and finalization, it was really heavy on definitions and stuff, but reading through it, everything looked solid. I'd have no issue. So I recommend moving forward with approval.
Okay, thank you, sir. A second?
Second?
I'll second that.
Sorry. I'm not sure who said, okay. All right.
Either one of us.
Sorry, there's a delay. Okay, we have a first and a second. All those in favor of recommending to the board that they proceed with reviewing the ordinance pending inclusion of adapting Mr. Mosher's changes and legal review, say aye. Aye.
Aye. There's a delay. Aye.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And again, if anyone has, so it sounds like the opportunity to check back to see the legal reviews would be at the next board meeting at the end of November.
Yes, if depending on what Alan can get done, we're anticipated is to have the board review it on November 22nd.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, for the members that had concern about the definitions, a lot of those are lifted verbatim from the state regulations that they just adopted. So that's why they're pretty involved and technical, but they were printed in the ordinance the same way they read in the regulations.
Okay, to be compliant.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alan. Okay. Excellent. 7:28. Okay. All right. So we'll we'll push item B4 to the next meeting in January and proceed with closing items. Are there any comments from the committee members? All right, go Stu.
Okay, I'm going to be fast, I swear. Okay, my comment is to start with. I'm curious as to why the committee isn't being given the CR&R benchmark progress report so we can kind of keep up with what they're doing. Is it just a matter of us asking to see that, or?
Well, it's available on the website if you want to.
Well, no, I look at it, but I mean, as collectively as a group and this is why. I went through the 7 criteria that the board is using to determine if the CPI increase is going to be granted at the end of the year, and they're making forward motion. And the thing that concerned me is that there's a focus on complaints going down, which is important. You don't want people complaining. But there's nothing about actual missed pickups that is being reported specifically by residents that's being tied into it. So I looked at the report that staff has put out for the last 4 months, where complaints in July were 94, August at 36, September 35, and October there were 16 complaints. So it shows the complaints are going down, which is great. But in September, my mom's neighborhood, the whole neighborhood got missed. So I reported every street that didn't have their trash picked up, which was 9 streets. And the way I understand it, it's being reported as 9 complaints, as opposed to the how many hundreds of houses that didn't have their trash picked up. And that's my concern, because I worked at Nordstrom many years ago. I know the importance of lowering complaints, and it burns a lot of staff time. But if people are just getting tired of complaining because they think the system isn't going to work for them, and I say that very generally, I don't mean that directed specifically at the sanitary district, but I've talked to a lot of my mom's neighbors, and I encourage them to report the missed pickup. And they're just kind of disgusted. And they say, why? It's not going to change anything anyway. And that's our trash carrier. We have, no, it doesn't matter. I don't have the time, which I understand it. I don't agree with it, but I can't make someone report something. And so I just want to make sure that even if we make all the complaints go away, if we still have hundreds of homes that are not getting their trash picked up on occasion for whatever reason, that should be recorded, and that should be included to the board when they're making their decision on whether these CPI increases should be granted.
I'll double check with Nabila and see how she's recording that. I was under the impression that a missed home is like a complaint. So if there was 9 homes missed on the street, then that'd be like 9 complaints, right? Or 9.
Well, it was actually 9 streets where none of the homes on the street. And I mean, I literally drove the whole track, and I would stop and get out and check trash cans to see if a significant amount of them on the street were still full. And it's Hillcrest. If their trash doesn't get picked up, they leave it. They'll leave it there for a week if no one picks it up, and the trash cans sit out there. But I put a lot of trash cans out for seniors in that neighborhood. And so I probably see more of it than other people. And it's an issue. And so I think it would be important if the people in here either paid attention to it or it was on our radar, because at the end of the day, our neighbors are worried, is our trash going to get picked up, and are we going to get charged the least amount for it? They want what everybody wants. Everything else in between that, they don't really care about. That's it. Thank you.
But I'll double check with Nabila, and we'll get back to you next week.
Thank you. Okay, any board or staff comments?
Madam Chair, I do have a quick plug for our household hazardous waste campaign that's currently going. And I just wanted to remind the CAC to please share that information, that all CMSD solid waste customers have 3 free pickups for HHW. It is door to door. So I have a little flyer here to hand out to all of you, and there's information on our website. So if you'll continue to share that information, that'll be great.
It's per year, 3
Per year, yes, 3 per year. So old paint, automotive parts or products, cleaning products, electronics, fluorescent lights, the list goes on. So utilize it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? No? Okay. All right, 7:34, I'll adjourn the meeting. Our next one will be held Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. Have a good evening. Thank you, everyone. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good evening.